Alright, thank God it's fantasy football season. I'm Buster Brown, and the show is Redemption Rehab. If you tuned in today, it's for one reason. It's to start winning championships in fantasy football. Today, we're talking about my top picks on the weekly waiver wire that'll help you get the job done. So let's head over to the weekly waiver wire report
and check out the facts.
All right, welcome back to Fantasy Football Redemption Rehab. Today, we're talking about the waiver wire for week 9 of the NFL season. We are already halfway through the NFL season, and with the injuries to important position players and the many teams that are on bye in week 9, you probably need some help picking up some players on the waiver wire to help your team get over the hump. So let's head over to the chalkboard
and check out the facts.
Okay, here we are back on the Fantasy Football Redemption Rehab website. And we're talking waiver wire, and we always start out with running backs. So let's check out some running backs that we like in week 9 of the NFL season, starting with the Miami Dolphins, Mark Walton and Kalen Ballage. With the trade of Kenyon Drake to Arizona, it opened up the opportunity for these two running backs. So, no more Kenyon Drake in Miami. He's down in Arizona. And these are the only two running backs left that have made any difference on Miami. Miami's not very good, but they're still an NFL team. We've mentioned Mark Walton for weeks now, and we told you this day would come, and here it is. Hopefully, you've picked him up. Let me give you some other running backs you should be checking out for week 9 of the NFL season, like the Pittsburgh Steelers, Jalen Samuels, and Benny Snell. These are handcuffs to James Conner and might be worth stashing on your bench. James Conner's no sure thing on a weekly basis. He has a tendency to get soft tissue issues, and he has a knee problem and other things that may cause him to miss some time. Stashing one of these players, or at least one of these players on your bench, may help you down the road in case of an injury to James Conner. Let me give you some sleeper running backs to help you, like the Atlanta Falcons' Brian Hill, who had 3 rushes for 29 yards and 1 TD against Seattle. Or the Detroit Lions' Trey Carson, who rushed 12 times for 34 yards against the New York Giants. Or how about the San Francisco's Raheem Mostert, who rushed 9 times for 60 yards and 1 TD against the Carolina Panthers in a blowout. Look, some of these guys are basically handcuffs or bench players who got to play due to injuries, or maybe there was a blowout kind of situation. But they're still players I would consider stashing on my bench in case they break out the rest of the year. There aren't many running backs left to be had in the waiver wire in week 9. If you get a chance, go over here to where it shows waiver wire week 8 and check out some of the other waiver wires, like in week 7. We record these so you can see them. You can always go back and look at any of these weeks, and it'll tell you what we said in those weeks. I can't keep mentioning the same players week after week. So let's head over back to the waiver wire and check out some wide receivers that you can pick up in week 9 of the NFL season. Starting with the Jacksonville Jaguars' Chris Conley. He had 4 receptions for 103 yards and 1 TD on 7 targets. Keep an eye on the injury update to D.D. Westbrook and Marquise Lee, because Chris Conley is the next man up if those two can't go in week 9. Let me give you a couple other wide receivers, like the San Francisco 49ers' Deebo Samuels. He had 2 rushes for 29 yards and a TD, and also had 3 receptions for 19 yards on 3 targets. He is an upcoming rookie when healthy and can produce for one of the best teams in the NFL, the San Francisco 49ers. He's a rookie, and he does do the soft tissue injury thing a little too often. But when he does play, he can put up some points for you, and I expect him, once he gets his feet wet, to do really well, especially come playoff time. Let me give you a couple other wide receivers to play for the Chicago Bears, like Anthony Miller, who had 3 receptions for 67 yards, and Taylor Gabriel, who had 4 receptions for 53 yards on 7 targets. Both should be considered for possible bench spots for Week 9 on your roster. These guys are good players. Gabriel's a veteran who can put up some hefty numbers. Just a few weeks ago, he scored like 30-some points and scored 3 touchdowns. And Anthony Miller's coming back from injury, and he might start to put up some numbers also. Let me give you some sleeper wide receivers that can help you in Week 9, like the New York Giants' Darius Slayton and the New York Jets' Demaryius Thomas. Slayton had 2 receptions for 50 yards and 2 TDs on 5 targets. We've mentioned him several times this year. And the New York Jets' Demaryius Thomas had 5 receptions for 63 yards on 5 targets. Demaryius Thomas is a veteran, and if he plays well the rest of the year, I could see him getting you not only 10, 11 points, but maybe some touchdowns to go with it. And let me give you 2 more wide receivers that are deep sleepers that you should be watching out for in weeks to come, like the Oakland Raiders' Zay Jones, who had 2 receptions for 27 yards and 2 targets, and Hunter Renfro, who had 4 receptions for 88 yards on 4 targets and a touchdown. Hey, these guys haven't been on that team very long, and once they get some chemistry with David Carr, I think you might see one or both of these guys pick up some targets later in the year. So let's head over and check out some tight ends that you may want to acquire in Week 9 on the waiver wire, like the Tennessee Titans' Jonnu Smith, who had 6 receptions for 78 yards and 1 TD on 7 targets. Smith got his chance to play when Delanie Walker got hurt last week and made the most of it with a breakout performance against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Look, Jonnu Smith's a big guy, man. I wouldn't want to tackle him, but I could tell you what, he's finally getting his chance. We've mentioned him early in the year. You can always go back and look at Week 3 or 4 over here on the waiver wire. Just click on any of these buttons as I mentioned before, and you can check out and see we've mentioned him back in Week 3 or 4. He had a breakout game, and as long as Delanie Walker's hurt, I think he's worth picking up. Let me give you some other tight ends you should be looking at, like the New York Jets' Ryan Griffin. He had 4 receptions for 66 yards with 2 TDs on 4 targets. Griffin continues to produce for the Jets until their starter Chris Herndon comes back from injury. Chris Herndon's been suspended for 4 games, and when he came back, he got hurt. He hurt his hamstring. But when he comes back, they got 2 quality tight ends that Sam Darnold's going to be targeting often. He's worth picking up on your waiver wire and stashing on your bench along with Chris Herndon. Let me give you another tight end that we've talked about all year, like the Houston Texans' Darren Fells. He had 6 receptions for 58 yards with 2 TDs on 6 targets. Fells is someone we have mentioned several times this year along with fellow tight end Jordan Akins. Both will continue to produce as long as Houston continues to utilize their tight ends in their game plan. Houston Texans need help blocking for the running backs and quarterbacks, so they like to use a 2 tight end set. These guys can not only block, but they can catch. So they're worth taking a look at on your waiver wire in Week 9. Let me give you some sleeper tight ends that might help you fill the bill this week, like the previously mentioned Chris Herndon, who's coming back from suspension and injury for the New York Jets, or the Denver Broncos' Noah Fant, a rookie for Denver who had 5 receptions for 28 yards on 8 targets, which was a team high in targets against the Indianapolis Colts in Week 8. Okay, let's take a look at some quarterbacks that might help you in Week 9 of the NFL season. Starting with the New York Jets' Sam Darnold. He was 21 for 30 for 218 yards with 2 TDs and a whopping 3 interceptions. A truly awful game for Sam Darnold. He's only been back from a sickness for a couple weeks, so give him a chance to get some chemistry with his players. Plus, his schedule gets easy. It gets real easy the rest of the year. So if you need a quarterback for this week because of injury or bye weeks, or maybe you just need a good backup for the rest of the year, I suggest you give Sam Darnold of the New York Jets a good look. Let me give you another quarterback that you might want to consider, and that's the New York Giants' Daniel Jones. He was 28 for 41 for 322 yards and a whopping 4 TDs. A truly great performance for the rookie quarterback for the New York Giants. He does have a lot of bad games, and he does have a tough game against the Dallas Cowboys, but he might be worth adding to your bench for the rest of the year or putting in your lineup if you have an injury to your starting quarterback. Let me give you a couple more quarterbacks who might help you in week 9 of the NFL season, like the Kansas City Chiefs' Matt Moore. He was 24 of 36 for 267 yards and 2 TDs, filling in for an injured Pat Mahomes. Now they're saying Pat Mahomes might come back, but I'm pretty sure their coach is not going to let their franchise quarterback play 2 weeks after dislocating his kneecap. So I think Matt Moore might help you this week and next before they allow Pat Mahomes to come back on the field. And let me give you one other quarterback that's played well all year, and that's Gardner Minshew of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was 22 of 34 for 279 yards and 3 TDs, filling in for an injured Nick Foles, who's back practicing and is on the mend. They're paying Nick Foles $80 million over the next 3 years, so I'm pretty sure when he's healthy, they're going to put him back in the lineup, and Gardner Minshew may have to ride the bench once again. But he might be a good fill-in this week if Nick Foles doesn't come back in week 9. Let me give you some defenses that might help you this week compete for a championship, and some defenses you should keep an eye on for the playoff run in 2019. Starting with the San Francisco 49ers versus the Arizona Cardinals this Thursday. Or how about the Buffalo Bills versus the Washington Redskins this Sunday? Look, both these teams are playing against poor offenses. San Francisco is going to really put a hurting on Arizona on Thursday night. Arizona has no running backs. They're all hurt. They just traded for Kenyon Drake. Their offensive line's terrible, going up against probably the best defense in the NFL. Could be ugly. So in daily fantasy, I'd go after San Francisco or try to make a trade for them the rest of the year because they are the real deal. And if you need somebody that's good just for this 1 week, Buffalo Bills against Washington, that's the team I'd be going after, because Washington probably going to have to play a quarterback they don't want to, and it could get ugly for the Redskins. Let me give you some other defenses you should be keeping an eye on for week 9 of the NFL season, like the New York Jets versus winless Miami Dolphins. Anybody that plays the Dolphins is worth picking up. And the Cleveland Browns play the Denver Broncos without Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco was ruled out for this game this Sunday against Cleveland. Denver's offensive line is banged up, and they're putting in a quarterback I've never even heard of. So I could tell you right now, Cleveland should have a field day against the Denver Broncos. It's never too early to start thinking about the playoff defenses and kickers and quarterbacks that we are looking at for the playoff run week 14 through 16, or whenever your league does the playoffs. So let me give you some defenses that might help you in weeks 14 through 16 in 2019, starting with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have a great schedule, the Green Bay Packers, who have an awesome schedule, and the Cleveland Browns, who I just mentioned, all have great schedules in weeks 14 through 16. What I'd like to do is try to go into the playoffs with at least 2 defenses so I'm not stuck in a bad matchup. And I always want my secondary bench defense to have a great schedule in the playoffs. And you should start thinking about that in weeks 9 through 12 and try to get one of these teams as your backup bench defense to a defense you've been playing all year. Let me give you some kickers that we should be thinking about for Week 9 of the NFL season, starting with the 2 kickers that were on bye last week. The Baltimore Ravens, Justin Tucker, and the Dallas Cowboys, Brett Maher, were both on bye last week, and because of that, a team may have had to cut them because they didn't have anybody else to cut and they had to pick up a kicker, because that's what happens on bye weeks. So check your waiver wire, see what top 10 kicker was cut recently, and pick them up, especially if your kicker's not getting the job done. In summary, we're at the halfway point in the NFL season. Whether you're doing well or not, you should always scour the waiver wire for players that might help you win a championship, or better yet, if that's not the case, at least give you a chance to help you win some games in Week 9 of the NFL season. I'm Buster Brown. The show is Redemption Rehab. Good luck.